Hi everyone, I hope you're good guys and welcome to a new video. So new video, new rack today to help you create this kind of classic melodic techno sound that's been here for a long time right now. And I've created an Ableton instrument rack to make your life easier. And this sound is also perfect to understand how filter modulation works and how kind of a basic simple sound can be transformed into a more interesting sound just by adding a few modulation here and there. So today we're gonna cover all that. I'm gonna explain you how the rack works. I'm gonna rebuild the rack from scratch for those who want to go a little bit more deeper and appropriate themselves the rack. But first, let's have a listen how the rack works and what is the sound about. So here you can see there is a few presets from artists. It was just to give you an idea how it's this kind of sound. So you have you can have an idea what kind of sound I was talking about. This kind of plucky sound. Obviously, I made the rack the way that you can appropriate yourself, make things a bit different. So you have different presets that you can reach just by clicking here. So all that can be done just by tweaking the macro here and the lyrics. You can use the macro as well to modulate your sound. So you have some more key sound. You can make bass sound as well. You have this kind of basic. You can use the macro to modulate. And you have as well some more FM sound. And you have this kind of vibrato style bass line. This is a bit, it's not like the classic sound, but it's just to show you that with the rack you can do more than just the basic, than just the classic sound basically. And you have this kind of, so you can use it as a lead as well. You can even use the arpeggiator here and get but yeah, that's what you can do with the rack. So basically to create this sound, it's pretty easy. You just need a sawtooth waveform that you're gonna apply a low pass filter. So I recommend a 12 dB low pass filter. Here for this example, I use the Moog Prodigy from Wavetable, but here what does all the job is the filter modulation. So here I don't have really filter modulation. I have my filter here. I can control the cutoff here. But you're gonna see as far as I put here, I'm adding some filter modulation, which means that my filter is gonna open and close very fastly. And how it open and close, you can decide it with the attack control. So it's gonna set how long it takes to open. You can see around 30, you can get this kind of fluty sound. And if you go a bit more, I still have the arpeggiator, sorry. You have this kind of brassy, more kind of sound. And the decay obviously is the time the filters go back. So I will even consider it as how short you want your sound. So if you want something very short, let me bring back the attack. Something very plucky or something a bit longer. So that's basically what defines the basic classic sound that you hear. Now there is a lot of way to improve it, making it a bit more exciting, and we're gonna cover that. But first, let's have a look at the other parameter. So you have here oscillator 1 waveform. So if I open here, you can see it's gonna be wavetable. And basically the idea, so you have this basic sound which use one oscillator. And if you want to make it a bit more complex, why not to use a second oscillator and being able to control that as well. So the first one, you can control only the shape. So here, if you go here, you have the text info in the corner, and you can see you have different settings. So at 0 it's a sine wave, at 35 it's a sawtooth, at 60 is square, and at 80 is more like a pulse. So you can see here how it's changing. So you can see here it's more like a sine triangle, and obviously it's fading between the waveforms. So here you go to sawtooth, and then you go to square, and then you go more like a pulse, which is like a narrower square. So you can control the waveform of oscillator 1, but obviously I activate oscillator 2, and I've done some mapping as well, where you can control the oscillator 2 waveform. So here you don't hear it because the volume is down. So I've decided to map the volume as well, because sometimes having just one waveform, you've got kind of more pure sound. And when usually if you add a second oscillator, it's going to be a bit more beefy, and sometimes it's going to be a bit of detune, but it's really up to you. So you can control the volume, you can detune the second oscillator compared to the first one. So if they have both the same waveform, let's go back to a sawtooth. And you can detune, so you can put the +7 for the classic fifth, but you can go an octave upper, or you can even go like, if you want some weird tone, just detune like one semitone or so. And the other thing I add is the detune. So you can see here is detuning. So if you want to slightly detune, so just add a bit of excitement and kind of make the sound a bit strange compared to like that. So that's how you're gonna shape your basic sound. And then I was talking about modulation. So I've added some modulation in the way you can really add a bit of character to your sound. So the first one is FM amount. This I've noticed is something used a lot lately. So you have the sound basically like this. And you can add a bit of FM to be more aggressive. You can be obviously a bit more gentle. But yeah, I've mapped the FM control. You have different kind of mode here, and I've mapped it to the amount to the macro. One thing I could have done, I haven't done, you could choose as well the pulse width, which is more kind of a classic modulation. You can play with that as well if you want something different. I've choose the FM. And then the next macro is vibrato. That's really add character. Vibrato is the pitch modulation, and you can see how it adds a bit of excitement. It's really easy to do that. You just take your LFO, you set a bit of pitch modulation. So always be gentle in the matrix in wavetable, because it's always a very subtle modulation. You go to LFO2, and usually I go for the sine wave or the triangle, and you bring the rate at 8 Hz. Usually it works well. And then I've just mapped the amount to the vibrato amount. And that's what gets my vibrato. Then you have the glide. So the glide is the pitch modulation between two notes. You know, if you play a lower note and the higher note, you can have this sweep. So here is without the glide. You can see there is no pitch modulation. And if I bring the bit of glide, so this works well for legato leads, or even like for arpeggiato, it's really work well. And then to add more modulation, you can as well add modulate your filter. So you can choose the amount of filter modulation and the rate. And then you have a bit of noise level if you want to add some noise. And you can control the reverb decay. So you can either like straight away play just without and create a sound just by using the macro. You can play it random if you wanna try to get weird result as well. But if you wanna build your own and know how I built this one, we're gonna start right now. So Ctrl+Shift+T, create a new MIDI track, and you need wavetable. All right, so the idea, like I said, it's a classic sound, and I knew that I will have the filter envelope. I will modulate the attack of this modulation and the decay, like I said, to create like a fluty sound, brassy sound, short sound, long sound. And then I knew that I will have at least one oscillator, and I want to control this waveform because obviously sawtooth it's good, but sometimes you want different ones. So for this rack, I didn't use the basic one. I've been to Vintage and I used the Sub-3. So this is a great way to make your own. You can try different kind of wavetable, obviously. But yeah, I can already start to map oscillator 1 waveform, and I can start to map the filter. So I would usually put the filter like this. You're gonna see later that we're gonna do differently, but then we want to control the filter envelope. So here in Matrix, you want basically your envelope modulating the filter. So you can put around 50. And you wanna bring down your filter. So like I said, 12 dB low pass filter. I'm gonna use the Prodigy model, and I'm gonna add a bit of drive, just to add a bit of grid, no resonance. And you can see without filter modulation, the sound is pretty dull, but when I get this pluckiness and this sharp. And so I want to be able to control the attack. So I'm going to map the attack and I'm going to map the decay straight away. I'm going to bring down the sustain because I want something very plucky. Now there is a problem in Ableton. You cannot control the matrix here amount. You cannot map it to a macro. So the trick here is to go to value, and you have this peak here that you can modulate basically, and it's kind of acting like you filter envelope modulation. So you're gonna map this there. So this way, if you want something pluckier, you can. So the next idea now was to, okay, we have a second oscillator. Maybe it can be great to add a bit of harmonics. You can use it as a sub oscillator. You can use it as an octave you pitch upper to add this extra harmonic on the top. So I say, why not? But I wanted to still have the ability to maybe don't use it. So I had to map first the volume. So I'll map it to macro 7, and it's going to be os to volume. And I want to be able to control the shape as well, so I'll map it to macro 6, and I say oscillator to waveform. And like I said, it can be great to detune, for example, sometimes 7 semitone to have a nice effect. So I'm going to map this to macro 8, and I'm going to oscillator to pitch. And like I say, I wanted this soft detune as well, which kind of gives this, yeah, nice detune effect. So this you're gonna map to macro 9, and you're gonna put oscillator to detune. All right, now we say we needed our FM, so I'm gonna put in FM and assign the amount to macro 10. Do the same here, put in FM amount to os to FX2. So this is FM amount. Okay, perfect. Next one was the vibrator. You remember I showed you need to go to Matrix. I use LFO2 to modulate the pitch, just one. And you go to LFO2, you put the rate at 8 Hz because that works well for vibrato. And you map the amount to macro 11 that you rename vibrato amount. And now you have control over your vibrato. Then we say we wanted to add glide, so you need to put it in mono here. So you can make another version of the rack, a poly version. So basically you just come here, click, and you're gonna be able to play the same rack, but in polyphony. That can be a nice trick as well to make it your own. And put it in mono, apply the glide to macro 12 that you're gonna rename glide. Now here comes the interesting thing. So here was the filter LFO, and you had as well the LFO rate. And here you had some noise, and you have the reverb that I'm just gonna add now. It's gonna take 2 seconds. Okay, and I just mapped the decay. The reason why I mapped the decay, not the dry rate, because the dry rate I usually like to put it around 30%. It works well, but this way you can work if you want sound a bit with a longer room or smaller room. Now I wanted to, before to talk about the filter modulation, I need to talk about the noise. I wanted to add noise. There is no noise by default in Wavetable. So the thing I have to do is basically add an extra layer. So I've used operator. You can use any instrument and you just need to use it for noise, or you can deactivate all of the other operator and you can just select here noise white. Now obviously you want your noise to react like how the amplitude envelope and the filter is modulating. You want to react as well as the same as your wavetable. So in order to do that, here you have all of your mapping and you need to do the same mapping. So I put the filter the same, Prodigy, 12 dB, no resonance. And so you will usually map the filter. I'm not gonna map it now and you're gonna understand why. And I'm gonna do the same here. I'm gonna remove the mapping and you're gonna understand why. Up, I remove the mapping and you want your envelope, same filter envelope modulation. You want your attack, decay. This you can do exactly the same, maybe add a bit more release. So there is a bit of changing here to do. I'm not gonna do it now. You can check in the original rack, but because you can see the envelope are not exactly reacting the same. So basically when you move the macro here, for example, here is going to be 332 milliseconds, but if you go here, you're going to see it's a different value. So you need to change that, tweak that in order to make it match a little bit more. I'm not going to do it now because it's a bit long to do it, but let's go back. Yeah, you have your noise. And obviously now you want to put back your filter. Now there is like I said, I wanted to apply an LFO to the filter, and operator has an LFO, wavetable has an LFO that I could have applied and mapped to the same macro, but here again, there are different kind of LFO, and when you map them, it doesn't match. So sometimes you have the LFO on your operator, so on the noise, which has a different rate than the one on your wavetable. So it's kind of a problem. So the only way to do that was basically to use an external LFO, and you have that in the modulator. You have LFO here, and you can just put them, and you can map to the frequency here, and you can map, you can add here, and you can map this here. So that's why I unmap the macro, because if you filter it's mapped to the macro here, you cannot apply the LFO mapping. So the mapping has to be free. Now, how I'm gonna control this frequency? Yes, it's easy, because here in the LFO, you have this offset, which is gonna now be like kind of your filter. So if I reduce the depth, you can see here when I move the offset, it's moving the filter, and same goes with the operator. So that's gonna be my new filter. That's gonna be what I'm gonna map to the filter. So this way now, when I map, you can see it's opening both filter here to the same here. And obviously now you wanna map the rate, LFO rate, and the filter LFO. So now this way you have the amount and the speed. So now one thing we haven't done is actually the noise level. So you need this to map to the 15, which is noise. I could have mapped this one as well, but I done this one in the original. So this you map to noise. So this way. So now this way you have control over your noise level. And yeah, in terms of mapping, it's pretty much it. Now I've had a couple of effects to kind of make the sound a little bit warmer. So I'm gonna remove the delay, and you're gonna see what I've added, and I'm gonna tell you why. So I have vinyl distortion, and it adds a bit of drive and a bit of stereo. This is kind of driving the input, and this is kind of adding a bit of stereo as well. And you have this drive here, which is really nice as well. I really recommend to play with. Just add a little bit of something. Let me. And then saturator, adding a bit of harmonic, make it louder. And then I have channel EQ because just to make it the sound a little bit more softer, because it's a digital synth, so it's kind of sounding sometimes a bit harsh. So I just use this channel EQ, which I boost around 3 kHz, and I bring down the high, so it's kind of a shelf combined with a low pass filter, and it's kind of softer on the sound. And then I had color limiter, so it's not even limiting. I just add it because I like the saturation and that this limiter gives. So obviously there is a bit of gain, but to make the sound a bit warmer. And then I just add a delay and reverb was just to make it a little bit less dry, obviously. But yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of the rack. Now, a few tips I haven't talked about. One thing which is great is when you go to MIDI here, you can control the filter with the note modulation. This way, the lower the note, the lower the filter will be, and the higher the note, the more the filter will be open. So this way, it's really nice because your kind of bass notes are more darker than your high note, which are more like get more harmonics. You can see I add a bit of random here and just add small value to randomly change the oscillator position or the filter. So basically what I mean is, like, instead of every time I play the note, instead of being 160, for example, it's gonna be 160, 165, 155. It's gonna slightly change, and does the same with the amplitude, maybe a few dB less, or same with the pitch. You can see random. It's slightly changing the pitch. This way, every note I press, it's kind of different from the one before. So that's a great tip I recommend. One thing as well I haven't talked you can do, it's adding some unison. If you want a super brassy sound, so that's something you can play with. One thing I haven't done, you can use your LFO to modulate the amp in order to have a tremolo. Tremolo, it's really great as well to have another kind of effect modulation. Especially when you play high note. You can see. So this is something you can do. I'm gonna actually leave it like this by default. So like this, you can just go to amount and play with. So like I said, you can switch in poly and kind of playing more like a pad sound. Don't hesitate to play with arpeggiator as well, especially when you add a bit of glide. That can be great. And yeah, even though it's a basic sound, one thing I recommend is obviously put you on FX. You can add some chorus, you can add different kind of delay, reverb, you can add a bit of flanger, really to kind of, you can filter it as well with an EQ and kind of make a weird curve to kind of really shape it in a different way and really make it sound your own, adding your own character. That's something you can experiment with. And yeah, as usual, the rack is available for free in the description. You can just download it, grab it. I will put the MIDI file as well. And thank you very much for watching and see you soon, guys. Bye bye.